Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Assalamu alaikum, dear participants. Welcome to this session of moral lessons from the Quran. Today we'll be studying a portion of the Quran as usual. Just going to share my screen with you. These are verses 111 to 112 of Surah Tawbah, which is the ninth surah of the Quran. And I have been discussing in some of my previous sessions that this surah is regarded to be the pinnacle of the surah of all the Quran, in fact, in which the judgment was finally delivered to the denominations which were there present in 7th century Arabia. So the idolaters were told that if they deliberately persist on their polytheism, they'll be put to death. The people of the book, they were told that because of the fact that they were primarily monotheists, that although they would not be killed for their crime of denying the Prophet, but they would be asked to live in subservience to the Muslim state and pay jizya as a tax of their own subservience. And then we find the hypocrites also being dealt in this surah, and they were virtually their reputation and their personal image was shattered in the eyes of the society, because the Prophet was asked to not pray for them or ask for their forgiveness. So this actually virtually eliminated them, at least as people or as a group which had infiltrated into the Muslims. They were fully exposed as the ones that they were not actually true to their claim, and they were just posing to be Muslims. So within these three pronouncements, we also have the Quran telling us that as for those Muslims who have professed faith, who have followed the Prophet, who have kept alive their commitment with the Prophet, are going to be rewarded. And today, actually, the verses that we are going to study relate to this promise of the Almighty with the Muslims. So we know that in the Quran, the final messenger of God, Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, he was asked to pronounce this final judgment on behalf of God in Medina. And this was because of the fact that the Almighty wanted to create a mini day of judgment on the face of the earth, so that people coming after this time are reminded that this miniature day of judgment, if this is going to happen for nations who have intentionally denied their messengers, then a greater day of judgment awaits nations who have come after these messengers, or in whom the messengers were not directly sent. And that greater day of judgment would, of course, prevail one day. So these stories of the ancient messengers of God, or ancient nations of Arabia have been preserved, and more so the last time that this miniature day of judgment took place in the times of Prophet Muhammad is equally preserved, and in fact is the real theme, if we can say, of the Quran. So I was discussing the fact that as far as these verses are concerned, they relate to the reward which those who would follow the promise of the Almighty and the promise that they themselves had made with Him and His Prophet, what would be their reward, on what would become of them. So here it is. Inna Allah, Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. Inna Allah ashtara min al-mu'minina anfusahum wa amwalahum bi anna lahumul jannah yuqatiluna fi sabilillahi fayaqtuluna wa yuqtalun وعدا عليه حقا في التوراة والإنجيل والقرآن ومن أوفى بعهده من الله فاستبشروا ببيعكم الذي بايعتم به وذلك هو الفوز العظيم التائبون العابدون الحامدون السائحون الراقعون الساجدون الآمرون بالمعروف والناهون عن المنكر والحافظون لحدود الله وَبَشِّرِ الْمُؤْمِنِينَ. In reality, those who have professed faith by making a pledge with the messenger, their person and wealth have been bought by God, and with the promise that in return He shall grant paradise to them. They fight in the way of God, slay others, and are slain. This is a true promise incumbent upon God, and in the Torah, in the Gospel, and in the Quran. And who can be truer in fulfilling his promise than God? So rejoice on your deal that you have made with God. Bear in mind that this only is the greatest success. They are those who repent, worship, are grateful, who exert for the cause of God, who kneel and prostrate before Him, urge people to do good and forbid them from evil, and protect the bounds of God. It is they who are true believers, and a prophet give glad tidings to these believers. So this is one of the very powerful verses of the Quran, which actually tells us that this is a deal that we have made with the Almighty. Inna Allah hashtara min al-mu'minina anfusahum wa amwalahum bi anna lahumul jannah, that by making a pledge with God's messenger, they have actually pledged their own person and wealth, and God has actually bought their person and wealth in exchange for the life of paradise. So their own person and wealth, when they expend this for the cause of God, then this is something which is a deal that believers have made with God. Now this is something so extraordinary. It's so exhilarating to even read this fact that God has actually made this deal with us, that if we spend our persons, which means whenever our life is needed, and of course if we spend our wealth, then God has promised paradise in return for this. And this is like a bear. Bear means a deal, a contract which God has made. And it is said that you have to rejoice with this deal that God has made with you. It's not an ordinary deal. In fact, this is something which not only the Quran mentions. It says that وَعْدًا عَلَيْهِ حَقًّا فِي التَّوْرَاةِ وَالْإِنْجِيلِ وَالْقُرْآنِ, which means that this promise that that has been just referred to is not just what is mentioned in the Quran. It is mentioned in the previous scriptures. It is mentioned in the Old Testament. It is mentioned in the New Testament, and of course the Quran. So the words are وَعْدًا عَلَيْهِ حَقًّا فِي التَّوْرَاةِ وَالْإِنْجِيلِ وَالْقُرْآنِ وَمَنْ أَوْفَى بِعَهْدِهِ مِنَ اللَّهِ. And who is more truer to his promise than God? So if God has made this promise, then of course it is bound to be fulfilled. So I was just looking through the Old and New Testaments to give you a reference each, one reference each from both these previous scriptures, which actually tell us that how the Almighty has the deal that He has contracted with the people. And let me just read out. In fact, at the moment I have the Urdu Bible with me, so I'm just going to read it out from the Urdu. So it's the book of Deuteronomy, which is the book from the Old Testament, and this is the revised canon, the fifth book of the Pentateuch, which is called the book of Deuteronomy, or the revised law also. So it says, सुन इसराइल, खुदावंद हमारा खुदा अकेला खुदा है, तू अपने सारे दिल और अपने सारे जी और अपने सारे जोर से खुदावंद अपने खुदा को दोस्त रख. Of course, which exactly translates what this verse has said, that you love your God, your Lord, with all your heart, with all your soul, with all your mind, and as a result, this is what God is going to give you. In exchange for that, this is what He's going to bless you with. And in the Gospels, we know that the kingdom of heaven, or the divine kingdom, or such words, they are actually used for paradise. This is a very common usage which Jesus has adopted. So to give you one example from the Gospel of Matthew, which is this is chapter 19 and verse 29, says, जिस किसी ने घरों या भाइयों या बहनों या बाप या माँ या बच्चों या खेतों को मेरे नाम की खातिर छोड़ दिया है, उसको 100 गुना मिलेगा और हमेशा की जिंदगी का वारिस होगा. So whoever has left his brethren, his close fraternity, and his cultivated land for my sake, God says, which of course means that they have spent this for the cause of God, then they will receive a 100-fold, and as it says, they will be the inheritors of of eternal life. And as you know, that the kingdom of heaven, or the eternal kingdom of heaven, these are common expressions which Jesus has used in his parables for paradise. So precisely, you can see that what the Quran has just stated. These are just two references. Otherwise, you'll find many other areas of the New and the Old Testament referring to this fact that basically this is a misaq, which is a Quranic word for contract. This is a deal that you have made with God. I mean, one can not even think that you could make a deal with God, but God says that I have made a deal with you, that if you spend your own life and wealth for my sake, then this is how I'm going to reward you. So it's like a contract, it's a deal. And I mean, we were in no situation to be regarded as a part of this deal. It's of course the tremendous benevolence and compassion of the Almighty that He actually has made us a party to this deal. So وَعْدًا عَلَيْهِ حَقًّا فِي التَّوْرَاةِ وَالْإِنْجِيلِ وَالْقُرْآنِ. And then it says that وَمَنْ أَوْفَى بِعَهْدِهِ مِنَ اللَّهِ. So who is more truer in fulfilling his promise than God? So if God has made this promise, you can very well know that it is going to stand fulfilled, come what may. And this is something that all of us, of course, are witness to, that if God has made this deal, He will honor it to the utmost. So فَاسْتَبْشِرُوا بِبَيْعِكُمُ الَّذِي بَايَعْتُمْ بِهِ. So it says, rejoice on your deal that you have made with God. I mean, these are beautiful words. فَاسْتَبْشِرُوا بِبَيْعِكُمُ الَّذِي بَايَعْتُمْ بِهِ. Why? Because وَذَلِكَ هُوَ الْفَوْزُ الْعَظِيمُ. Because this only is great success, that you receive glad tidings, you rejoice, you are happy that you have made a deal with God, and there's no better a deal than you make with God, because He's going to honor it, and honor it in a very generous way. And وَذَلِكَ هُوَ الْفَوْزُ الْعَظِيمُ. There is no greater a success than fulfilling this deal, and if you are able to fulfill this contract and be rewarded as a result, then this is ultimate success. Zalika huwal fawzul azim. And then the next verse actually spells out the attributes of these Muslims, or the ones who were mentioned earlier on by the words Inna Allah hashtara min al-mu'mineen. Those who have professed faith, their person and wealth have been bought by God. So these are the people who are being referred to, that they are ones who have made this contract. And then who are these people? What exactly are the attributes of this people? So the next verse beautifully spells out these attributes. The first of them is at-ta'ibun. And the way it is mentioned here as Ismul Fa'il, all these attributes, this gives a certain amount of emphasis in what is actually implied by the words. The first of them is at-ta'ibun, which means that those who repeatedly repent, who are penitent, who always think that they are going to go back to the Almighty. He's our shepherd, He's our Lord, He's minding His herd. And if there is any blemish for us, and if we knock at His door, He is going to immediately open His door and take back any stray herd or sheep that had gone away from that herd. So the first attribute is a ta'ibun, that they are not arrogant, they are not presumptuous. Whenever something happens from them, whenever some evil is done by them, immediately they repent. So at-ta'ibun. So this is the very first attribute that is mentioned. And next it is said, al-abidun. So they are ones who worship. Of course, worship is our expression, our connection with God. The word worship actually means that you express your own humility and servility before a mighty king, or the Lord of the universe. Can you express your own servility, your own humility, at the same time acknowledging that you are nothing, and you are standing before the Lord of the heavens and the earth, and therefore you would like to connect with Him. And of course, this connection, or these rituals of connection, which have been delineated by prophets of God, of course, their thirst is found in us. We would like to connect to God. We would like to have a relationship with Him, but how exactly? What exactly should be done? Where should one go? What should one do? So it is through prophets of God that we come to know that this is how you worship the Almighty. And of course, worship is something which gives us that inner satisfaction. It gives us that contentment. We feel relieved. We feel in a different realm of life when we are standing before God and worshiping Him. It's such a fulfilling experience that all of us, whenever we worship God with our heart, with our soul, with our mind, we find ourselves refreshed. We find ourselves in a new plane, rejuvenated. And of course, this is something that is also the fodder of the soul. So just as our body needs fodder and needs food, the fodder of the soul is this connectivity which we call worship with the Almighty, of the Almighty. So the next thing which is mentioned, or the next attribute after The first two, at-ta'ibun al-abidun wal-hamidun. So who are they? They are one who are ever grateful. They are always thankful to the favors that God has blessed them. They might be feeling deprived for some loss that they might have suffered, some illness might have come their way, some financial problems might come up their way, they might have lost a dear one. But then this does not make them deviate from that feeling in which they feel that they are drenched with God's blessings. I mean, there's so much around us, so much within us for which we need to be thankful of. And if we continuously thank God, profusely thank God, express this gratitude, not only by the tongue, by of course, addressing the Almighty, but by sharing our blessings. This is what real gratitude is, that you not only express this from your tongue for the Almighty, at the same time you share your blessings, and this makes that gratitude reach that pinnacle which it is required. And this is how believers spend their days. And then it is said, as-sa'ihun. As-sa'ihun, and it is mentioned at several other places in the Quran also. It actually refers to exerting for the cause of God. I mean, doing some effort in the cause of God. This could be traveling for the sake of learning knowledge. It could be spending your life for a certain cause. It could be exerting yourself or spending your time and effort for the well-being of people. So, as-sa'ihun relates to everything that you do for the cause of God and for His people in a manner that you are able to say that I have devoted myself for this cause. So, devoting oneself for the cause of God, which of course encompasses the welfare of people as well, which are creatures of God, which are, to speak in a special way, they are basically the family of God. So they are the ones who take charge, and they always think that they are going to have this effort that they always would like to make for the cause of God. And then it says ar-raki'un as-sajidun, which of course means that who kneel and prostrate, which now of course refer to the prayer, because earlier on it was said al-abidun, which is a general word for worship. It is inclusive of all worship. It is inclusive of your behavior as well. But here the prayer is mentioned by two of its components, that is kneeling and prostrating. So when you kneel before the Almighty, when you prostrate before the Almighty, when you place your forehead on the ground, the feeling that you get is something which cannot be described in words. It's such a fulfilling feeling that you have. You feel as if you have come closer to your own reality by placing your head on the ground. You actually confess to the fact that you are made from mud. You are closer to mud. You are closer to clay or the surface of the earth, and you are bending before someone who is your creator, who is your provider, who is your sustainer. So both these words, ar-raqi'un and as-sajidun, they both depict the prayer, and how beautifully they depict the prayer is something that we all know, because when we go into prostration, the feeling that we have, again, is something that we really cherish afterwards. And then al-amiruna bil ma'ruf wal nahuna 'anil munkar, that they are the ones who always urge people to do good whenever they get the chance, and they urge people to stop from doing evil whenever they get the chance. And al-amiruna bil ma'ruf wal nahuna 'anil munkar, this is something which the Quran has explained at a number of places, because this is one of the primary or the basic responsibilities which is imposed on every single believer. And finally, what is said in this verse, which ends the qualities of these believers, is وَالْحَافِظُونَ لِحُدُودِ اللَّهِ, that they are the ones who protect the bounds of God, which means that they never cross limits. Whatever limits they have been prescribed for in various issues, in various areas of life, they never cross those limits. They stay within these limits. Precisely, this is what taqwa is. The word taqwa, which is used all over the Quran, it tells us that there are people who stay within limits. They don't cross limits. They are disciplined in their life. They control their lives. And finally, once all these attributes have been enumerated, the verse ends on these beautiful words: وَبَشِّرِ الْمُؤْمِنِينَ, that, "O Prophet, please give glad tidings to these believers, because it is they who are true believers. They have in fact understood the essence of faith. They have understood the essence of faith. Now give glad tidings to these people that for them, as we just earlier on mentioned, وَذَلِكَ هُوَ الْفَوْزُ الْعَظِيمُ, that for them is that great success that is something beyond which we cannot imagine anything." So with these words, I end my talk on this paragraph, and I'm now available for your questions.
Dr. Saleem, thank you very much. Another fantastic talk, especially with the references from other scriptures. Dr. Saleem, we all on our journey of life for the quest of truth. You've been on a journey as well, and your opus magnum has been the transmission of Qur'an. And obviously, you must have come across various references from Orientalists and other authors and scholars outside the Muslim realm, outside the Muslim belief. Did it ever shake your faith? Did you ever go through a crisis of spirituality whilst you were studying Quran? Is Quran the book of God? Does God exist? Are religions man-made? Did you ever go through that whilst you were reading all that? And if you did, how did you deal with it? And I'm not after a standard narrative, do this, do that. I want to know how Dr. Shehzad Saleem dealt with it. If you ever face that situation.
Well, actually, I can say that I don't remember facing this situation ever, because my training in studying religion is not to panic in crisis, but to deal with crises, which means that you are always critically thinking, and it's not a big deal for you that if something very established suddenly comes to you and you think that it was a myth. So you see, the training that I got from my teachers was to take things in an academic way, whether it is the Quran, whether it is the existence of God, whether it's a process of self-discovery that you are embarking upon. It's like a voyage that you are going through, and if it shatters your accepted truths, or it shatters your acknowledged facts, it doesn't matter, because this is nothing which is against that quest for the truth. So my training, before even I was able to join my illustrious teacher, Ghamidi Saab, has been from some other teachers as well. So very earlier on in my life, I Alhamdulillah was trained in a way that I was given this lesson in a very profound way, that all that you need to do is find what the truth is, and not panic if something is against your ideals, because this is the real test that you have. If you don't feel like that there is something that you were actually given by your parents and it does not hold to the test of time, then this is an objective thing. There should not be any emotional attachment to it. It has to be given up. And if there is something which is, of course, absolutely correct, then there's no reason to give it up. So I have taken my life in this way, and I don't remember passing through any such crisis.
Thank you. Thank you for the honest answer. Okay, we'll open the floor for the questions. First, Fatima, please go ahead with your question.
Assalamu alaikum. Yes, I want to ask that, is it like a rule in Islam that when a dua is not answered, it's always for our good? And if yes, is it mentioned somewhere in the Quran?
Actually, it's mentioned in general terms, not specifically about a dua or a supplication. So in Surah Baqarah, the words are Asa an takrahu shay'an wa huwa khairul lakum, wa asa an tuhibbu shay'an wa huwa sharrul lakum. That at times, Asa an tuhibbu shay'an, you like something to happen, but it doesn't happen, and the opposite thing happens, and you dislike it. And Asa an tuhibbu shay'an wa huwa kurhul lakum. And at times you would not like something to happen, and it does happen. So both the opposite things are enumerated. Asa an takrahu shay'an wa asa an tuhibbu shay'an. And you might dislike a thing, you might like a thing, whereas it was in fact not good for you, or not right for you, or bad for you. And then the verse ends on these beautiful words, Wallahu ya'lamu wa antum la ta'lamun. God knows and you don't know. So in other words, when you come across unexpected happenings which disappoint you and which frustrate you, don't lose hope or don't lose your ground, because they are happening according to the grand scheme of God. Wallahu ya'lamu wa antum la ta'lamun, because he knows the future, he knows what is in store for you. Because at times, had your wish been granted, you might have suffered, you might have gone to another extreme. And I can also tell you, and I'm sure you would agree, and all of our participants here would also agree, that there are so many instances in life that when we look back, we always thank God that such a thing did not materialize. And if had my wish been granted, I would be in a big fix, or I would have stumbled. So if we just look back, you'll find many examples, I'm sure, from your own life, in which when something tough came your way, either it had something good stored in you ultimately, which means that you were given the chance to become closer to God. It was an opportunity that you became tougher than before. Or at times, if you're still passing through this and the hikmah or the wisdom is not evident, rest assured that there will be a time that if you trust God, that you will become aware that yes, there was some wisdom. If not in this world, then in the next world, definitely you'll come across that wisdom. So it is here that you need to trust God. So you see, trusting God is not a blind thing. Trusting God is trusting Him regarding the consequences. And that is that you have to do your best. You have to leave no stone unturned as far as what is required for you to do. There is this law of dua or supplication that we have to understand. So when we raise our hands in dua, there is a I would say a prerequisite to this which the Quran indicates, and that is, have you done your own part? Have you played your own role? Or you're actually assigning your own role also to God, that He should fulfill it? No. First, do what you are able to do, which is in your capacity, and then you have to pray. And if the prayer is answered, I mean, well and good. If it is not answered, don't get frustrated, because either it is deferred, or there is something good for you and it's never answered, or it is stored up as a reward for you, because prayer in itself is a worship ritual, and you make dua, it's like a worship ritual. So all in all, it's basically trusting God that whatever happens for us happens for a certain good.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, Fatima. Shiraz Ahmed, please go ahead.
Quran says that Prophet Noah's age is 1,000 years, except 50 years. In total, 950. Or somebody thinks that the people of the cave stayed in the cave for 300 years, plus 9 more years, right? So it's an unusual style, you told me earlier. Not very common in Arabic to mention, years or time span in such a way. So if Quran adapts a unique style, for the lack of any better word, unusual style, is it a good enough reason to think that it's not literal, it's metaphorical? Or this is something that somebody put me in almost in exact these words. Because the style is unusual, then I can't take it literally.
I think if the style is unusual, it doesn't mean that you can't take it literally, because if something is literal or metaphorical, linguistics itself has to be at the back of it. And when the Quran explicitly says in these words that Noah lived among them for 1,000 years, less than 50, this doesn't by any measure of our linguistic prowess tells us that this is metaphorical. It is just a way of expressing that it was 950. And I think I did elaborate this as well, that this unique feature adopted by the Quran at times also has to do with the rhythm of the verse, that is, I mean, preceding that. So using the word khamseen aman or alf am or something to this effect, which actually I mean is not a normal way of enumerating things, has a lot to do with the rhythm of the verse, at times with stylistics of the verse. And you'll find this in the Quran. And this, because of the fact that the way this is mentioned, it may be a unique way. But uniqueness does not entail that it is always metaphorical. Uniqueness just tells us, I mean when I say, okay, you can go there and at 10 a.m. plus 2, everyone would mean that, yes, I imply 12 noon. No one would say, well, when I get up and go at 10 a.m. plus 2, no one would say, well, this is a metaphorical thing, because obviously, although I'm not saying 12 noon, but I mean 12 noon. 10 a.m. plus 2 hours would never mean that this is something metaphorical. So one of the very good things to understand the Arabic language, in fact, for any other language, is to speak the same words or similar words in our own language and see whether when we do them in that way, is it metaphorical or not? Because you see, 90% of the languages have very common styles regarding metaphors. And you will immediately realize what the actual fact is. So I think that this is a unique style, no doubt, but it is literal.
Shehzad bhai, about this 950 Noah's age, is it impossible? Means that's part of the objection, that how can a person live for a millennium? And I will end my talk, please.
I think we know that in earlier times, previous scriptures, the Bible mentions the ages of Adam and his progeny and several other prophets in 700 years, 800 years, 600 years. This was a common thing in olden times. And I think also, if you study Surah Nuh, which is, of course, Surah which depicts the preaching of Prophet Noah, it becomes very evident that he must have lived for so many generations, which are about 30 generations. Because you see, there's a verse at the end which says, وَقَالَ نُوحُ رَبِّ لَا تَذَرْ عَلَى الْأَرْضِ مِنَ الْكَافِرِينَ دَيَّارًا إِنَّكَ إِن تَذَرْهُمْ لَا يَلِدْهُمْ إِلَّا فَاجِرًا كَفَّارًا, which means that don't leave any of these believers alive on this earth, because whatever they will produce is going to be a disbeliever. Whoever's offspring are going to come through them in this world, they are going to be disbelievers. No prophet would say this unless he has seen a whole lot of generations going past him, and then seeing that, look how he had preached them. Because Surah Nuh, if you read them, if you read the surah, it's a beautiful surah which depicts the whole preaching endeavor. And it says how Noah went to them in private, in public. أَسْرَرْتُ لَهُمْ إِسْرَارًا فَقُلْتُ اسْتَغْفِرُوا رَبَّكُمْ إِنَّهُ كَانَ غَفَّارًا. So these words speak out that he expended a lot of effort. And then finally, when he became himself so disappointed and frustrated and exhausted, he said that such is my testimony, that I have been living amongst them for such number of years. Of course, in Surah Nuh, the extent of years is not mentioned. But these last words say that such is the amount of disbelievers that they produce, that I have no hope left in them. Whatever they are now producing whoever they are producing amongst these generations, they are disbelievers. La yaliduhum illa fajiran kaffara. Whatever they will beget as disbelievers. So this can only be said by someone who has seen a lot of generations. So I think this is another indication. Other than that, because of the fact that, of course, that I believe that the Quran is a document from God, and there's nothing. I mean, if he gives us information about it, there is nothing that we could doubt. And I haven't found anything against this information in any scientific. I mean, I can say any scientific research to make things even more, putting things in a different perspective.
Thank you, Shehzad. That was a very interesting question. I know it's in the minds of many people who deal with the scriptural metaphors and myths and legends. And it's not just Quran. I think it's the Christian and the Jew apologists always are haunted with these questions. Najia Nazir, please go ahead.
Okay, since our program is quite a detailed analysis of moral cases presented in the Quran, a point of conflict is in the choice that has been part of the scholarship and the legacy of the male scholarship that we've seen around. If you're familiar with Rudyard Kipling's White Man's Burden, it talks about a white heterosexual man's burden to take care of the primitive people of Africa and Asia, and hence we see that they took upon themselves to look at the lesser part of humanity, that is us, they colonized us, and that has been written extensively about. Sorry to say, when I look at the male scholarship, I'm sorry, I don't want to use the male scholarship, the scholarship of Islam, jurisprudence, and how it has come down to us, I feel it's a Muslim man's burden to tell women how to conduct themselves. There's extensive discussion on hadith literature, but it never comes to how Allah has presented Islam to both men and women together. Both of them have been given, apart from certain ayahs, which, certain ayahs that place things in different perspective about gays and everything, that I'll come over there also. But when a man and woman have to do the same deeds, they have to have the same belief, they have to offer the same performative acts of Hajj, Zakat, namaz, and, Salah, everything has to be done in the same way, and they have to die the same death, and they have to answer the same God. Why does it look like a religion for men, which is explained to women by them? Does it appear to you? That's the first part of my question.
I think let me first answer and address this. You see, at the back of this issue, I've thought about this a lot, because this is something which has bothered me for years and years. And at the moment, the sense that I make of it is that, you see, you need to understand the history of mankind in order to come to grips with this question. So just put religion aside. And you'll find that mankind has been through patriarchal societies ever since religion, or ever since mankind was born on this earth, and ever since people started to live. There are, of course, claims that they were matriarchal societies, but I haven't found any well-grounded claim. There are still, but I don't rule out, okay, fine, there could be some matriarchal societies, but the fact is that, a very, very large percentage of societies ever since time immemorial have been patriarchal societies. And and as the saying goes from the first Barron Act, and that power corrupts and absolute power corrupts absolutely. So patriarchal societies have always invested in that male dominance, that has been a feature, whether religion is there or not. If you just put religion aside, you talk about irreligious societies or non-religious societies in which there is no religion and there is patriarchism, you'll find the subjugation of women even worse at times. If you look at the views of some of the people, there is a lot of material you can find on the internet who have nothing to do with religion, and they treat women worse than animals, or they think about them as worse than animals, is hidden from no one. So I think this patriarchal mindset is the real culprit. And then what added to this patriarchal mindset was, when religion was, of course, given, or people started to practice religion, then certain religious directives which suited their patriarchal mindset were misinterpreted or wrongly interpreted or overblown or exaggerated in a way that it reinforced their understanding. Thus, for example, the fact that men are head of the family, which is, of course, what the Quran tells us, and I think I'm pretty much sure this was the case in previous scriptures as well. This further reinforced that patriarchal mindset, and instead of remaining to the extent that the Quran told them that this basically is an administrative measure, and it does not curtail the freedom of the wife, it does not impose any restriction on her, it acknowledges her separate existence. The patriarchal mindset, interpreted it as if religion is also telling us that yes, you are the rulers of your citizens, and your wife is actually a citizen of your kingdom, and you can treat her any way that you like. And this has been happening ever since. Even today, we know that this is going on. So I think basically it is that and feminism again is a revolt against this patriarchal mindset. And because of this patriarchal mindset being reinforced by religion, it makes it a double force to be reckoned with. So therefore, feminism, when it started off, we know that the great amount of persecution feminists themselves, people faced, is not unknown to anyone. And even today, we find this going on. And because of the fact that it was not dealt with properly, so we find feminists going to the other extreme. Extremes always breed extremes. This is a common thing. So on the one hand was that patriarchal religious suppression, and on the other hand was that feminist revolt, which could not remain within bounds, and it crossed limits in many cases. So this is a question of this wave of extremist mindsets, which is part of our own heritage that is playing with us. And I don't think that it has got as much to do with religion as with this mindset, because I think in my humble opinion, and I can be wrong, religion actually controls this patriarchal mindset. It actually greatly brings it to the test of reality, that this is where patriarchy or patriarchal trends at best can go, not far beyond them. And those two are something which, if they are explained in a way, because I've been doing so for a number of years, I find women, when I talk to them, they immediately acknowledge and they say, yes, this is something which is very common, this is something very acceptable to us. But when you speak of this and this and this and that, that is totally unacceptable. So what has happened is that instead of understanding that religion is actually curtailing patriarchy, on the other hand, what happened was that religion is reinforcing patriarchy, and not only reinforcing it, is, bolstering it and strengthening it and giving it all sorts of new areas to conquer. And I'm sorry, this is what is going on. And of course, even people who realize it, all that they can do, like people, like helpless people like me, all that we can do is try to do our best. This is a pain that I feel deep down in my soul, and I really feel it very, in an extent that I cannot describe it. And that is why I take it upon myself that whenever there are situations in which women need to be explained this directive, or wherever I get a chance to talk to men and husbands that they are acting worse than tyrants and dictators, I make it a point. And to tell you the truth, I, belonging to the same fraternity, have tried my best to reform myself. Otherwise, I think I too was amongst them, and I still maybe am, if you ask my wife, maybe. But I do try consciously to curtail that. If you studied Adler in philosophy, you see, I guess now we would be going to other areas of our quest. But as Freud has said, that your own sexual impulse is the governing instinct in your body. So Thomas Adler, I think is his full name, he said that the instinct of dominating others is something which governs you. So Adler actually was pretty much right, that this, to dominate other people, is something that comes naturally in our instincts, and it needs to be curbed. It's not that it is just found in men, it is also found in women. But the fact is that when it is reinforced by this patriarchal mindset and religious mindset, that instinct of dominating others, it goes to great heights, and it cannot be simply, you just cannot curtail it by lecturing or by telling them, because it becomes part of your nature. It's like your second nature. It is in your blood. It becomes a tradition. So the father transfers it to the son, and the son to his son, and so on and so forth. So this is a paradigm, this is a whole narrative that this world is actually afflicted with since a very long time. And I always speak of this, that we need that silent majority who at times is indifferent, at times doesn't care, to play their role. Because you see, people who are who are vocal, they are very few in number. You'll find very few of them, but because of the fact that they dominate and they hold the key to these issues, that they prevail. Otherwise, if the silent minority plays its role, I think that this issue can be checked. But who is going to bell the cat? That is the question.
I can suggest who can bell the cat here, Dr. The thing is, it is surprising that when you see how Rasulullah conducted himself amongst his wife, it's so exemplary. And the example, how he conducted himself amongst them, how he tried to, have a light-hearted moment with them. And Hazrat Aisha has been quite explicit in when she talks about the marital relations as well. But when you see Rasulullah as depicted in Hadith narration, you see a completely different picture. And you may find out a single narrator, I don't want to name that esteemed companion or prophet, but that gentleman has been singled out also by a lot of hadith scholars. But still, to put women in their place, those same narrations are repeated over and over again. And I'm sorry that is still being done, even as we speak, in sermons, even in televised lectures, where it is in light-hearted moments, it would be said, as we all know, women do this. As we all know, this happens. no, this cannot happen like this, because just imagine yourself as a colonized Indian, and if you receive this kind of racist remark from a white imperialist, how would you feel? And I'm telling you, a woman feels just like that if she's singled out of the conversation during a sermon, and they are treated as people who need to be told how to conduct themselves. Of course, whenever any country goes through an Islamization movement, the part and parcel of that movement comes down to how a woman dresses herself. Now, in Quran, there are two places in Surah Nur and Surah Zab, 30-31 in Surah Nur and 58-59 in Surah Zab, where women and men both are being asked to do certain things. Okay, but as an example, exemplary prophet, we have Prophet Yusuf, who was held in a difficult position, and how he conducted himself. But because I've been part of all my life during traditional lectures of Dawra Quran, and every year, only 4 years ago, I gravitated towards Gandhi Saab's narrative. So I know everything which has been going on in traditional circles, what kind of ahadith are sought, so that we keep on, covering ourselves in double layers, because we are the one who bear the onus for everything that goes wrong morally in the society, and men are outside that blame, and men are like that, boys will be boys. This is a culture it has come down to even our discussions. So this is where we need to draw the line. This is where we need to present the Prophet's uswa, how he conducted himself with his wife, with the women in his life, with his first wife, who he talked about so endearingly all the time. So this is what we need to do, instead of going for hadith to find validation to put women in their place, and to make women feel inferior Muslims, to children of lesser God, if you will. So that's what my rant, if you could call it, has been. Thank you.
Absolutely correct, and I think you're absolutely right in naming this, that a lot of misconceptions regarding women have emanated because of erroneous interpretations from hadith literature. So on the one hand, the Quran buckles patriarchy, but on the other hand, a lot of out of context narrations, and not only are some of them out of context, but some of them are outright fabricated. There is a list of narrations which have been regarded as mawzu. Mawzu means they are concocted or fabricated regarding women, and they are freely quoted by sermonizers. And of course, the ignorant masses, they don't know that they are absolutely baseless. So that's another area. So I think this is all that we can do is spread this awareness amongst people that we know, who are around us, and do our best, and leave no stone unturned, and give this legacy to our next generation, pass it on to them, and tell them that this is one of their responsibilities as well.
Thank you, Najia. Thank you, Dr. Saleem. Before I go on to the second round, a quick question from the chat. What is the logic behind pointing the finger during namaz, by which they mean, when we're reading a tayyat? What is the logic behind that?
Well, actually, this is an area which has been an issue of conjecture by many scholars. Many people have come up. But if I present the view of my teacher, Ustaz Ghamidi, he has written in his book and lectured on this topic as well, that there is no explanation from the Prophet himself about this. And people have actually speculated or conjectured that perhaps it was to reflect the oneness of God, that the finger was raised. But whether it was something which was specific to the Prophet himself, whether he wanted others to follow it, we have nothing definite. Similarly, we don't have any certain clue that what was the time on which this finger was to be raised. We find narratives in which the Prophet is raising this finger ever since the start of sitting down in a tayyat, and all through sitting down. Other people thought that, well, because Ashhadu an la ilaha is a place in which you bear witness to the oneness of God, so perhaps this is the right place to raise the finger. So there is nothing which can be said with certainty about this, except that it meant something, and in all probability it meant declaring the oneness of God, and it's an optional act. It's something not part of an essential part of the prayer. And so therefore, if you wish to raise your finger at any part of that area in which you're sitting down, is okay. And if you even don't do it, even that is okay.
Thank you, Dr. Saleem. We are back onto the second round. We are back onto Fatima. Fatima, please fire away.
Yes, I want to ask that if God is all goodness, जैसे कहा जाता है कि अल्लाह ताला सरापा खैर है और उनसे खैर ही सादिर होती है, then why and how God created evil? The why part I somewhat understand that He created evil to test humans on this world, but the how part, like I logically don't understand that if someone is all goodness, then how does that entity create evil?
I think it has to be understood in the light of the Quran by referring to two aspects. God does not create evil. It is misuse of man's power that creates evil. So the authority which man has to exercise his will, I mean, he holds a gun in his hand, and if he wants, he can just fire someone and kill someone. If he doesn't want, he can abstain, of course. Yes, there are circumstances which God does control, in which He does at times interfere and does not let that misuse happen. But in normal circumstances, it is just misuse of human freedom which results in evil. So God is not the creator of evil. What can be said is that God is the creator of certain calamities. So you see, the word shar in the Quran is used in two meanings. One is evil, which of course I refer to the fact, and this comes into being through misuse of human freedom, which they wrongly use, and as a result they create a lot of problems. People like Hitler, people like Mussolini, Saddam Hussein, or the sorts of them, they misuse their power, and as a result they create a lot of havoc for people. But on the other hand, there are natural calamities like earthquakes and disasters, like floods, etc., tsunamis. So these are not what is called evil technically in our English language, but the Arabic word used for them is shar as well. So the shar, as it is used in the last two surahs of the Quran, min sharri ma khalaq, for example, is what is said in Surah Falaq. It doesn't mean the evil which God has created. It means the calamities or these trials which come from God. So you have to make this distinction that God is merciful. His mercy does not make him create evil. He has created mankind. Mankind produces that evil because of his misuse of power and freedom to exercise that power. On the other hand, God creates circumstances, for example, illness, poverty, or such things, which not are evil per se, but they are circumstances which cause misery, you can say, and that misery is a means of trial. So we need to make a distinction between shar in the meaning of calamity or trials, and shar in the meaning of evil. So because of the fact that the word is same which is used in the Quran, and it has two different connotations, that it is difficult to make sense of it.
God has created suffering in the form of disease and poverty, but
again,
things like
one more thing. I mean, that again is at times the result of misuse of that freedom by man himself. Thus, for example, if this COVID thing is something which was the result of a Chinese experiment, or as there are so many people saying that it was something which backfired, I mean, we just cannot blame God for that. It was something which formed a calamity, which became a calamity, but it started off with a human error. I am referring to natural disasters, like, for example, earthquakes, like, for example, monsoon winds, which might play havoc. So this is something which is governed by God. I mean, earthquakes, we don't create earthquakes. We don't create tsunamis. We don't create storms in the sea. So this is something which is which comes into being through this various scientific processes that go on in this universe. And there are certain physical laws on which this universe is governed, and as a result of the interplay of those laws, when there are calamities, they become a means of testing mankind.
It's like that God has given the potential to humans to create evil.
Yes.
Thank you, Fatima. That is indeed what the free will theory is: potential of person to create evil. Now, there's a written question, but the question is, what is the definition of religion and belief? So obviously a very broad question, but this is how it's been.
both these are English language words, and it depends on the context that you use. At times they are used synonymously. At times they are used such that religion is a broader concept which encompasses beliefs and practices both. Because beliefs, of course, signify just your, relationship with God or with humanity. It doesn't include practices. So religion is belief plus practices. But at times, the way the context is used, it is used synonymously as well. And then there could be some further nuances. For example, it's not just religious beliefs for the which the word belief is used. It's like an ideology as well. At times, the word belief refers to a secular ideology as well. So I think don't take things in isolation. When you're trying to find out something, look at the context, and your own common sense will lead you in most cases to the right interpretation. And if there's any difficulty, obviously you can consult a linguistic scholar in that.
Thank you. We have just got one more raised hand, after which obviously we'll call it a day because time is getting on. So Nusrat Khwaja, please ask your question.
Yeah, Assalamu alaikum, Dr. We discussed a few sessions ago that man and woman, they were created by the same process. It started with clay and then it progressed. But this hadith bothers me because the hadith, I don't know how authentic it is, where Prophet said that woman is created from the rib. So she's crooked, like that. How do you explain that in view of what we discussed the other day?
There are two separate things. I mean, the fact that the women have been created from the rib is a biblical construct, which actually is mentioned in the Bible, that Eve came into being from the rib of Adam. So in the Bible, it is mentioned that Eve was born from the rib of Adam, and this gave rise to the popular notion that women are made from the ribs. This is one thing. Now, another thing is that in certain narratives, the Prophet has compared a woman's nature to a rib. There are certain narratives. And those particular narratives, what they are telling men and of course husbands is that what you need to do is to make them realize their worth and argue and debate with them instead of forcing them. Because if you bend something, you're going to break it. And so therefore be gentle and nice to them. If you argue with them in a way that is going to challenge their ego, so just like a rib, they're just going to crack away. So that has a very different meaning. So there are two things which have got mixed up. So at times women become adamant when they are spoken to in a way that challenges their ego, and I think this is no different for men as well. But because of the fact that always remember that the hadith narratives, they always are situational. At times they are, the Prophet is talking about a particular situation, even about a particular group of women could have been the ones that are referred to here. So please make a distinction that in the Torah it is said that Adam's rib was responsible, or Eve came out from the rib of Adam. So this is a biblical concept and it has infiltrated in Islam as well. But then there is a separate hadith which says that a woman's nature is like a rib or something to that effect. And as I said, that has a different meaning.
But this creation from the rib is an authentic hadith?
This is something that is slipping my mind. And when you asked this question, I think I did once research on this, and I think there is some work that I've done on this narrative, and this is published as well in one of my books. So at the moment, it's just slipping my mind whether that narrative.
But creation from rib doesn't mean women is weak. It just means she's different, maybe emotionally and.
Creation from the rib is not a Quranic concept at all. That's what I'm saying. It's something which has come from biblical history. So that narrative that women have been created from the rib of men is in itself something which is not ratified by the Quran. This is just a historical reference from the Bible. The narrative which the Prophet is actually attributed to the Prophet, I was just referring to, is a different narrative. It does not speak of the fact that women were created from the rib of Adam or from the rib of a man. It is a narrative which says that their nature is like, zil is the word used, zil is the Arabic word for rib, kazil'e, which means they are like a rib. So one is talking about the origin of women, which is a biblical construct which the Quran negates. And the narrative which is attributed to the Prophet is actually a different narrative, which is referring not to the birth of a woman, but to her nature.
So can I look up that your research on the...
One of my books is called Islam and Women. And I have, I mean, I don't have it right here, otherwise I would have immediately found out. But you can see it. I mean, it's on our websites.
Yeah.
And it has this narrative being explained in that.
Yeah, it could mean that they are a bit emotional. They, you know, like...
Remember, I mean, the Prophet seldom talks about women in general. You see, one of the greatest misconceptions is that perhaps like the Quran, the Prophet one day sat down on a daily basis and started to lecture people regarding women or men or marriage issues. This never was the case. People at times would come in groups, at times refer to a specific situation, at times had a personal question. And when they narrated to the rest of the lot, people thought, well, the Prophet is giving everyone the same advice. So all this is a key point that I have learned from my teacher, that never think that hadith is talking about anything in a generalized way. It is always situational. There is a situation which is reflected either partially or fully. So get to the bottom of that situation and you'll find out that it is a very narrowed down thing which the Prophet just said, but perhaps to a particular group of people or maybe just to one single person. And I have gathered so many examples, and when I was lecturing on this hadith topic, this hadith course, which I did so a couple of years ago, I gave many examples in which seemingly something which became so popular was actually said to a couple of persons, keeping in view their background. And the most stark example is the narrative which relates to wasiya being 1/3. It is generally thought that you cannot make more than 1/3 will. And when you find the details and you go back into the details, you'll find out that the Prophet is not giving a general directive. There was a companion who went to him and said, I'm going to make a will of all my money and I'm going to donate it. And the Prophet cautioned him, well, you have children, don't do like this, so you'll be depriving them. And he started to come down to half, to 2/3, and ultimately 1/3. And the Prophet said, well, if this is your situation, these are the number of your children, okay, 1/3 is fine. And lo and behold, instead of realizing that the Prophet was actually advising a particular situation, it became a general rule. So I think that if you people here are able to take this point as a takeaway today, that always remember that these are situational, they relate to a specific situation. People generalize them later on. And this is one of the gravest causes of misconceptions that have resulted in understanding Islam.
True, our women think that they have been belittled or considered weak. Although it's not that, because I find my wife thinks much better than me. She cares about the household and the family, and while I focus on my work and other.
Thank you, Mr. Prof. Thank you very much. Thank you, Dr. Saleem. There's no denying the fact that biology derives physiology and physiology derives psychology. And there is a clear-cut, very well-documented difference between the biology of a man and a woman. So it's not a big surprise if there are physiological or psychological differences. But thank you very much, all the participants. Thank you, Dr. Saleem, for your time. Inshallah, we'll meet up again tomorrow.
Tomorrow is going to be our last session of Ramadan, inshallah. So then after Ramadan, we'll resume our normal sessions.
Thank you very much for that.